Thank you. Deputy
Thanks
McNamara.
very much. I would agree with people for profit that to the extent that obviously we don't want there to be an avalanche of evictions at any particular time, and we certainly don't want it now, and some continuation of the eviction ban which the government brought in the Residential Tenancies Amendment Act in 2022 may be required. However, I can't support this particular bill for a number of reasons. The first one is that the bill as it's drafted basically says that the government may extend the emergency period for such period as they consider appropriate. So of course it's, you know, if you're trying to tie the hands of the government on the one hand and then giving them complete power to determine what the emergency period is, I think is counterproductive. The other problem is that it seeks to add licenses to tenancies and treat them similarly. Now, of course, they're two very different things. Licenses are established so as not to give people legal rights, in particular the rent-a-room scheme. Now, I think we need to be very careful that in prescribing what a landlord or a licensor may do, that we don't disincentivise people from actually availing of the rent-a-room scheme. Because, you know, if you take somebody into your home, which is what the rent-a-room scheme is about, and if there's a fundamental breakdown in the relationship with somebody with whom you share your home, not rent out, give a tenancy in a separate property, and you can't do anything about it, well, obviously people are not going to avail of the rent-a-room scheme, and I fear that that would be counterproductive. I do, as I say, Deputy Boyd Barrett wasn't here, I do agree that we do need to extend some type of protection. But with regard to the type of protection that we have at the moment, there's two issues that I wish to raise, and that is the grounds upon which a termination is currently permitted. Ground 1, 1A and 2 are grounds that you can continue to terminate a tenancy, notwithstanding the eviction ban. Ground 4 was explicitly, I proposed an amendment, it wasn't reached at the time, enough time wasn't allowed, notwithstanding the importance of this issue, enough time wasn't allowed by the government, because it mightn't be the individual ministers, but it is the government that ultimately determine whether to impose a guillotine or not. And a guillotine was imposed in this important act. And ground 4 was excluded, and that's where a landlord requires the dwelling or the property containing the dwelling for his or her own occupation or for occupation by a member of his or her family. And it's not a carte blanche, because you do have to swear a statutory declaration to the effect of the intended occupant's identity, the expected duration of that occupation, and that the landlord is required to offer to the tenant a tenancy if the person who is supposed to take occupation of the dwelling doesn't, or if they don't take it for the period of time that it is envisaged that they would do. And I mean, of course, we have to make sure that that provision isn't abused. But I'm glad to note that the Taoiseach actually said that this is imposing a hardship, because if people come back from abroad, if they're accidental landlords, they're coming back from abroad, they need to take up a house that they own. Now, then I believe they should be able to do so, or if they purchased it initially for a family member, and that family member is now effectively homeless, I believe that they should be able to move into that house. I don't think that, I know that the argument against that is, well, you know, we're making one person homeless to provide a home to the owner of the property or their family members. But I mean, private property has to mean something. There has to be some advantage from owning a property. I mean, I think there's a narrative out there that private property and ownership of private property is somehow immoral. I don't agree with that. So while I do agree with the opposition largely that we do need to extend the duration of protection for tenants, we need to do so in a way that is not counterproductive, because as it stands, people will not, accidental landlords will not rent out their properties.